Uh, I think it's really perfect that we're having this panel right now because what did we do in the first session? We had Chuck Hahn, who was, putting up the strategic plan, the objectives, the goals, and then the tactics, right? Well, and then one of the top goals was student performance, right? That was one of the silos he was talking about. Well, we're going to have right now three great experts who are going to be talking about student performance and then actually kind of getting down a little bit more into those weeds about, all right, you want to improve student performance. Well, how are you going to do it? And what kind of information do you have to have in order to maybe ask those questions that were brought up in the first session? And, hold people accountable, because you can't hold people accountable until you have an amount of knowledge about reading and mathematics and all those core subjects in order to know what is good and what isn't good. And we know that in California, unfortunately, there's a lot that's not good. I mean, you look on, just take one example. We talked about the state testing, the CASP, but there's also the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the NAEP examination that is given every several years here in California and other states. And, on the NAEP examination, 7 out of 10 eighth graders here in California failed to perform at the proficient level in reading and mathematics. So, there's a huge gap of learning out there in many, many schools. And so what needs to be done to improve this tragic situation? And again, this is what our next panel on student outcomes is going to be discussing. We're pleased to have three great individuals who share their different perspectives on what school board members can do to help turn around this dire situation in your particular districts. First, we have my friend, Dr. Terry Stoops. I've known Terry for many years, right, Terry?
Yeah,
many years. And I've admired his work in both the think tank world and in the government policy world. Dr. Terry Stoops is the director of the Academically Successful and Resilient Districts Program at the Florida Department of Education. The program supports district school boards and superintendents by offering day-to-day guidance and best practices relating to Florida's innovative educational framework. He previously worked for nearly 2 decades, and this is where I first got to know Terry as a think tank colleague, at the John Locke Foundation in North Carolina, where he served as the founding director of that organization's Center for Effective Education. So we appreciate Terry coming all the way over here from Florida. I'm so happy to also have on our panel Mr. Sugi Sorensen. Having Sugi on our panel is really very special for me personally, because I actually interviewed Sugi for my book, The Great Classroom Collapse, which all of you have in front of you. And Sugi actually is the subject of 2 chapters in my book. So he was a great interview, you can tell. So, and also I just want to point out that we also have with us a new school board member from the Piedmont School Board up in Oakland, Mike Malioni, who is here, and he is also the subject of a chapter in my book. I interviewed Mike, who's a former math teacher and currently a math tutor up in the Oakland area, and he's got a really revealing chapter on mathematics as well. And anyway, so Sugi has a fascinating story to tell, and he's currently a senior systems engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory by day and a private math instructor by night for a math enrichment firm in the Los Angeles suburb of La Cañada Flint Ridge. He's also president of the La Cañada Math Parents, a parent math advocacy group in the La Cañada Unified School District. And he recently co-founded, I believe with Mike, the Institute for Mathematics Instruction, which is a nonprofit think tank. So he's joined our world. So welcome to that, Sugi. He taught mathematics and coached students in mathematics competitions in his district since 2014. And finally, batting cleanup for us is we're pleased to have Mr. Todd Collins, who's been at the forefront in pushing school boards to implement effective reading policies. Todd's an outgoing member of the Palo Alto Unified School District Board of Trustees, having served on the board for 8 years. He joined the board after a career in technology and finance, with his primary focus now on supporting and improving California public education. He organized the California Reading Coalition, a movement of educators, advocates, parents, and policymakers committed to improving reading instruction and outcomes for California's 6 million students. So we have an incredible panel for all of you here today to start off our afternoon. And with that, I want to have my friend Dr. Terry Stoops come up and start off.
I'm going to cover just a few brief topics. First of all, how are students doing? I'm going to do kind of a deep dive, show you some history, explain how we got here. As you can tell from the picture, it's not very well as far as math performance is going. Like I said, I'll describe a little bit about how we got here, and then what the de facto landscape is for K through 12 math, because what you're probably hearing from your superintendents and your assistant and associate superintendents of instruction doesn't really convey what's really happening, because the free market is responding, and there's basically a two-tiered system of math instruction going on pre-college. Many of the schools aren't even aware of this outside math instruction that's being provided. So how are we doing in math? As I said, basically, student achievement test scores show we're doing terrible. And then I just described that the students that are doing well need a lot of tutoring and supplementation in order to do well. So the two measures I'm going to look at, you're familiar with the CASP. All of you have probably been briefed on it by your staff members. Lance talked about NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. So that has a sampling technique. They test 10,000 students every 2 years. They do test in California. That's been around since 1969, but not all states have participated. That was until about 1990. So these are the grade 8 mathematics test scores. The blue line at the top is the U.S. national average. This goes back to 2000 through the last year that we have data for, which is 2022. They actually did the test this year in 2024 earlier. They're not going to release the results until January is my understanding. So we'll see how things did. A couple of things to note about California is the orange line. A couple of things to note. Scores don't change much, okay? So you'll see slight improvements from 2000 till 2013, then you notice a sharp drop-off. That's actually pretty severe. Anybody know what happened in 2013? Common Core, that's right. That was the first test after Common Core. Things started to get a little bit better, and then this is COVID. Well, I should say it's not COVID, it's the policy response to COVID. It's because they shut the schools down. So basically what this shows is that 20 years of slow, steady improvement was wiped out through two major changes, Common Core and the policy response to COVID. So this is a breakdown of the California 2022. They have 3 performance levels. They have what they call NAEP Basic, NAEP Proficient, and NAEP Advanced. This shows 2022. It shows you the baseline of 2020. This is the U.S. average. Main takeaway here is to note that 3/4 of California students are deemed to be below proficient or advanced. So these are the CASP scores. As you know, they're tested grades 3 through 8, and then again in grade 11. They have 4 performance levels. Standards not met in orange. Standards nearly met, and then standards met and then exceeded. And the basic way that they compare how kids are doing, and you look at your schools and your districts, they take the top 2 and they say standards met or exceeded, right? So a couple things to note here. You've probably all seen this dashboard for your particular district, okay? Same color codes. This is mathematics, this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm not so much interested in ELA. Only 1/3 of 8th graders are meeting or exceeding the state standards. And the state standards are not that high, okay? So I teach lots of students who get the max score on the math every year they take it. So these standards are pretty low. Notice that it gets worse the higher you go in grade, okay? This is 11th grade math. We're down to only 28% of students in California meet or exceed grade level standards in mathematics. Okay, so this trend that you see, this is going to be true in all of your districts, all of your schools, is whereas less than half, 45% in 3rd grade are meeting grade level standards or exceeding. That declines to 28% by 11th grade. So that's because there's more material to know. The grade level bands are actually a little bit wider, but student proficiency declines naturally. Okay, so your results may vary. I wanted to show you the extremes. So this is the top performing comprehensive high school in California. This is 2024 results. This is Lynbrook High School. I think it's in Fremont Union High School District in San Jose, okay? So they have 92% are meeting or above, and they only have a handful of kids that are at their lowest two performance bands, okay? So I like to go through the data. I dig into it every year. This shows Lynbrook is not actually the top performing high school. We have magnets and charters and selective admission schools. So the two top schools, one's a magnet, Gretchen Whitney and LA County and ABC Unified is a selective admission school. This was the high school where my kids went, the district that I fought for 12 years to try to improve math instruction. 100 miles away in Merced County, this is the lowest performing comprehensive high school, okay? This is Westside High, 11th grade mathematics. None of their students are either at grade level or above. 97% are in the second lowest. Are in the lowest. Only 3% are in the second lowest. Okay, so I wondered, like, how bad is this? And I found that there are over 300 high schools, public high schools in California, that have 0% met or exceeded, okay? That's fully 14% of all the California high schools have none of their students at or above grade level. So that's how bad the situation is in California. So how did it get this bad? So we consistently perform poorly. I'll go over where I think the root causes occurred. So just remember the baseline I just showed you. According to the national, 2/3 of students aren't meeting grade level in 8th grade. And in California, which is a lower standard, it's 2/3. I'm sorry, it's 3/4 and 2/3. So this just shows what NAEP shows as proficient. This is the US average. This is California going back to this actually goes back to 1990. Not much improvement. So I wanted to know how's California doing compared to the rest of the states? So what I did is I took all the NAEP 8th grade math scores and I rank ordered them from the top performing state on the left. This is Massachusetts. To the lowest is Alabama on the right. California is 42nd. The yellow is the national average. For Terry's benefit, I wanted to see where Florida was. So in 2019, you were 36th. This also shows the dark blue dots are for 2019. The light blue dots show what happened because of the policy response to COVID. So you'll see an average of an 8-point decline in every state. The only jurisdiction that did not have a decline was the Department of Defense Educational Agency, which is actually Shining Star. They wound up being the top performing jurisdiction in 2022. So what do these scale points mean? The top performing Massachusetts is 295, Alabama's about 270. According to Tom Lovelace, 10 points represents roughly 1 grade level of math instruction. So there's a 2.5-year difference between the top performing and the lowest performing. So the yellow here just shows, we've only had CASP since 2015. This is actually 4th grade. Test scores improve a little bit. Now this is the mean scale score. Yeah, question? This one right here? Yeah. This is Iowa. Oh, this one, Utah. This one right here. I believe that is Utah. It's either Nebraska. Oh, let's see, Nebraska or Pennsylvania. I don't know what the decline is, but it's only a few points. Yeah. It might be Utah. Let me see on this. Get my glasses out. Sorry. It's Utah. So notice that We've only had CAS since 2015. Pandemic wiped out 5 years of steady results. There's a little bit of an improvement into 2023, almost no improvement this year, okay? Gets worse in 8th grade. 8th grade, pandemic policy response, we dropped below where we ever measured, okay? NAEP showed we wiped out 20 years. So how bad is this? So there's an economist at the Hoover Institute, Eric Hanashek, who tended to quantify what is the learning loss. And he estimates that the hit to the US economy will be $31 trillion in lost GDP. And some of these changes, they're not temporary. Like in my district, I noticed, because I teach math, they stopped teaching 2 or 3 topics in 7th and 8th grade. They haven't resumed teaching them. They stopped teaching them forever. And I've asked them, why don't you resume teaching them? Well, the teacher said, oh, it was easier. I didn't have to teach 2 or 3 topics. So I don't know what's going on in your district, something you should look out for. Are they still teaching what they taught before the pandemic? It's certainly still being tested. Okay, I don't have enough time to go into everything that went wrong. The main thing I want to say is the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, NCTM. Many of your teachers are probably members of it. You'll probably be aware. Starting in the 1980s, they were doing national curriculum reforms that started us down this path of really destroying math education in the United States. They de-emphasized basic skills. They de-emphasized teaching basic algorithms. They said they were going to teach deep understanding, problem solving, but they weren't actually doing that either, okay? And they thought, you'll hear the same thing now when they talk about AI. AI is going to revolutionize education. Back in the 80s, they said handheld calculators is going to revolutionize education. Kids will not need to know how to do arithmetic. They started teaching kids to use calculators in kindergarten. Okay, general advice for math experts worldwide, delay until at least middle school. So a lot of these reforms that the NCTM brought in 1989, of course California immediately adopted them without investigating and vetting them. California math instruction was gutted, test scores stagnated, but it led to this thing called the math wars. So basically parents, what you guys probably got elected into, grassroots movements that said, hey, my kid's not being taught math. They formed these math groups, and it led to this very acrimonious period in education called the math wars. There was one good thing that came of it. In 1997, Department of Education produced a new set of standards. The first draft had over 200 math errors in it. So Pete Wilson appointed, actually Lance might know this, he had somebody say, look, you need to fix this. We can't give this to all our students. So they asked 4 math professors at Stanford to rewrite the standards. 97 standards were actually outstanding, okay? And we had them in place until we put in Common Core. It's a huge mistake. One of the main things they did in the 97 standards is they introduced this program called Algebra for All, which meant Algebra 1 by 8th grade for every student. This shows the raw numbers of students. There were less than 150,000 when they started implementing them. Grew 2.5 times in the period that it was used. This goes out through 2013 when Common Core started being downstream effects from Algebra for All and good quality math instruction. This shows the successful takers of AP Calculus A, B, and BC by ethnic group. Interesting thing here is that historically marginalized minorities actually improve faster than whites and Asians. This was reversed with Common Core because Common Core pushed algebra back to 9th grade for most districts, okay? Last graph I'll probably show you. Here, higher numbers are worse. This is Cal State University remediation math percentage. So what they do is if you apply to Cal State University, you take a math test. Are you ready to take their lowest level of math? If you're not, you need remediation. This was a great test, okay? 1989 NCTM standards, remediation rate was 24%. It increased up to 54% over the period these standards were in place. Those 97 standards I told you that were implemented, immediate improvement in the remediation rate. Kids were better prepared for college. We talked about college readiness, college career readiness. And then Common Core came in. The last year is an aberration. It didn't really decline. It's because they changed the test. But because the remediation rate started to go up, what did the state do? They got rid of the test. They forced the California State University to get rid of the math admissions test. Like I said, I don't know why they implemented Common Core, probably because we were in a recession and they dangled $2 billion of money to states because you guys were strapped for cash. So everyone adopted the Common Core standards. This was the effect, okay? This shows what percentage of kids are taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade, okay? So this is beginning of 1997 standards. Notice it quadruples from 16% up to 59%. This includes below 8th grade too. They implement Common Core. It starts to be put in place about 2013. It crashes. Algebra 1 taking rate drops to 19% in just 4 years. I just published an article on this. This presentation will be sent out by Lance. All these links are clickable. There's a two-tiered system, okay? The parents who don't know, the kids who don't know, they're getting fed school math, are probably not going to be prepared to go to selective STEM schools, okay? In a lot of higher SES districts, there's a lot of math supplementation, and those kids are getting access that many kids aren't. So actually it's making equity worse because the gaps are widening. Even in the high-performing districts, things like detracking, de-emphasizing calculus, there's this big movement to push data science. You're going to hear it from your administrators. You're going to hear it from CSBA tomorrow and the next few days. Parents compensate, okay? They're not potted plants. There's been a huge response from the free market. We have so many more options. Like in my town, we have like 8 different just math supplementation firms. There's Kumon. There was Sylvan Learning from back in the math wars. We have Mathnasium, C2 Learning, my company, other private companies. But many lower SES districts don't have these options. They have nowhere to go. Last observation, it actually gets worse in college. So whereas 80% of the undergrad students in math, 80% of the undergrads in all majors are US citizens, in the STEM graduate degrees, it flips. 3/4 of the students are not Americans, okay? Silicon Valley is begging that they don't have enough qualified workers who are coming in the STEM majors, okay? So it's a serious problem. It's just a couple of data points. I wanted to get to giving you some advice. So you guys know that you have to teach to the math standards minimally, right? You have your choices of math sequence. There's traditional math, integrated math. All of you guys have one of those too. Common Core math standards, the reason you saw that decline in performance is it slowed down math instruction in elementary. They took the proofs out of high school geometry. They moved Algebra 1 to 9th grade. A lot of things that pushed us in the wrong direction. What I do want to warn you about is the framework, okay? A framework is an implementation guide to the standards. It's not mandatory. You may hear otherwise from your administrators, okay? I know when I first got to my district and I brought this up, they all thought, oh, we have to implement the framework, okay? The framework is an implementation guide. It's just advisory. It was supposed to be released in 2021. It was so controversial that they went through 4 drafts, okay? In the first draft, they tried to actually change the standards. Legally, a framework can't change the standards. Standards haven't changed. The standards that you are obliged by law to teach all of your kids in your schools has not changed. The framework has changed. But basically, the people who wrote the framework changed the focus of math instruction to equity. Okay, so this is what they say the new framework does. You're going to hear about this over the next 2 years. They're going to say it addresses issues of inequity, puts meaning making at the center. We're not going to do drill and kill. We're going to focus on big ideas, open-ended problems. If you've looked at any of the new textbooks that are coming out that meet the new framework, they're really bad. Okay, they're going to make math more culturally relevant. This is what the promoters of the new framework are saying. There's a huge movement against it that came from mainly people, STEM professionals and professors in the UCs and the private schools. Once again, they're going back to the 1989 recommendations of de-emphasizing what they call it rote memorization and procedural learning in favor of what they call deep learning, conceptual understanding, but they don't actually do that either, okay? And if you look at the science of math, there actually is a science of math, just like there is a science of reading. It says you can't do the conceptual understanding until you get the basics down, okay? Probably makes common sense. So these are what the critics have said about the framework. I got to wrap up here. So it promotes pseudoscience, and misrepresents research, conflict of interest from people promoting data science. So these are the organizations that support them. They probably look familiar. Okay, the unions, U-Cubed from Joe Bowler at Stanford, a lot of progressive political causes. The organizations that opposed it and tried to improve it, STEM professionals, college professors. I have to sign 2 of those petitions. So what can you do? You guys have ultimate control. There's more authority vested to governing boards in California than most other states, okay? You have to approve all instructional materials. You get to decide how the standards are implemented. And remember, the curriculum framework is optional. You don't have to abide by it. Okay, so I would suggest to all of you, read the framework and then read the critiques of it. Decide for yourself, okay? I'll send out this, Lance will send this out in a little bit. You can go through all the links, decide for yourself. But I do say, if you don't think it's going to help your kids, don't follow the advice, okay? The problem is that the textbook adoption schedule is coming up next year. They're supposed to release in November 2025 the new list of state-approved textbooks for grades K through 8. Okay, they don't have approved textbooks for 9 through 12. When you're selecting your textbooks, don't just blindly follow what's on that list, okay? You can adopt textbooks that are not on the state-approved list. All you have to do is guarantee that they meet the standards. They did that in my district, but they picked a subpar curriculum. Avoid constructivist inquiry-based curricula like illustrative mathematics. I've heard bad things about iReady, everyday mathematics. We use that in my district. CPM in middle school. They may be using some of those in your districts right now. You're going to be told to measure every possible textbook against an organization called Ed Reports. Realize that Ed Reports, all they do is they say, how closely does it map what's in the standards? They'll actually punish you if you teach things ahead of schedule. I know that because the curriculum that the parents wanted to implement in my district, which was a Singapore math-based curriculum, was punished by Ed Reports because it taught subjects early. Instructional practices to avoid in general. Okay. Just be aware, these are probably already being used in your district. Student-centered self-discovery, problem-based learning, building thinking classrooms is really popular, equity-based grading. Do your research on these things before you let them into your schools. There was a bill passed just 2 months ago, SB 1410, that says the next time they create a framework, all middle schools should offer Algebra 1 by 8th grade to students who are ready. You don't have to wait. Got it done in my district. Took 6 years to do it, but now at least half our students have this option. Be wary of data science, okay? Supposedly this new promise, but there's not much math in it. So I think I'll just wrap up here. If you have any questions, you can contact me. Michael's here as well. And then we have a sign-up interest list.